Well, that's the question.
Still got Alan Woods, Christian Basil backing, Haley Equity, Lewis, another one as well.
Microphone test 1 2 3 4 5. Mic test 1 2 3 4 5. For the mic test 1 2 3 4 5. You all happy with that? 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5. Give me a thumbs up if you're happy. Yeah, all good. 1 2 3 4 5. Mic test 1 2 3 4 5. You all got that? Yeah.
Just a quick heads up, everybody. So we're going to try and get the conference underway at about 10:05. We've got some members from the College of Police in here, so if anybody want to speak to them and liaise with them. Just a reminder really with regards to the family, as you're aware through the notice of premises that we sent out, they've asked, they don't want to comment on the report and they don't want to be contacted by any media. You'll see at the back of the room we've got a hybrid facility set up as well. So there's around about 10 people and counting joining us on that Teams. So we will take questions from the room. We would ask though please just to say your name and the organisation that you're working for prior to asking a question, and just given the number of people here, just to ask one question per organisation. We are hoping to wrap up before 11 o'clock, so just be conscious of that, and we would ask that you only kind of leave and remain in your seats until the speakers have left and to exit through that back door. So we'll get underway in the next few minutes.
They'll be coming through that door?
Yes.
How are you?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to attend today's press conference as I publish the independent review into Lancashire Constabulary's handling of the Nicola Bulley missing from home search and investigation. I will take a few moments to outline the context of the review, the terms of reference and the next steps. Chief Constable Marsh from the College of Policing will then outline the methodology of the review, its key findings and recommendations. Our thoughts, first and foremost, remain with Nicola's family and friends at this difficult time. Even the publication of the report, whilst providing many answers for them, will involve a public and painful reminder of their loss. I hope all of us will remain entirely sensitive to that and respect their privacy. As I said in my public interview when Nicola was tragically found, whilst the police lead theory had sadly proven to be correct and the search and investigation focused on the right strategy and being well resourced, the public rightly had questions about how this became such an international story with often such negative headlines, and also with regard to the disclosure of Nicola's most personal and private details. As Commissioner, I am the public's voice in policing, and it is my job to hold the police to account. This review was commissioned to answer those questions so that I could take external assurance and expertise to be able to answer them effectively, and to ensure that all of UK policing can learn lessons from this missing from home investigation that attracted unprecedented global interest. This review has been timed to conclude when other statutory bodies have finished their own proceedings, to ensure that they can be captured as part of this process. These were the coroner's inquest to determine Nicola's cause of death. The coroner returned a verdict of death by accidental death by drowning. The Information Commissioner's Office to determine the lawfulness of the release of personal information about Nicola. They determined the release to be lawful. The Independent Office for Police Conduct to consider the self-referral by Lancashire Constabulary. They considered there to be no case for misconduct. I commissioned the College of Policing to conduct the review as the national independent body for police training and standards, including being the home for the National Centre for Police Search. It was commissioned to review the period from when Nicola was first reported missing to the point at which she was sadly discovered. It will have 3 work streams to focus on: the search and investigation, communications and media engagement, and the disclosure of personal information. I would like to thank the College for their diligent, professional and thorough work over the past few months. I have received their findings, their conclusions and recommendations, and as Commissioner, I accept them in full. As part of the process, I asked the College to notify me immediately if they discovered anything that would amount to action needing to be taken against any officer or employee of the Constabulary for misconduct or negligence of duty, or anything that would have altered the outcome of the search and investigation or indicated that Nicola could definitely have been found sooner. There have been no such findings, and therefore this review is very much a learning review, with a number of recommendations which, given the unprecedented nature of this case, are mainly for policing nationally. There are also many areas of this case where Lancashire Constabulary represented the very best of policing, with the search and investigation being well resourced, professionally conducted and calling upon national good practice. It is often too easy to sweep past significant amounts of good work and exemplary conduct to get to the areas of learning in a review. Given the whole core of this operational response is praised by the review, I would therefore like to take the opportunity to pause and thank the many officers, staff and volunteers of Lancashire Constabulary who worked tirelessly and professionally to find Nicola. I know that this is not the outcome any of them wanted, but they did their utmost for Nicola and her family. Following on from the publication of this review, I have informed the Chief Constable of Lancashire Constabulary that I want a full report on how the Constabulary will implement all of the recommendations for it in this review to be presented to me at an accountability board early in the new year. I will now hand over to Chief Constable Andy Marsh, the Chief Executive of the College of Policing, to talk through the review.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, and thank you all for coming today. Firstly, I want to start by recognising the immense tragedy at the centre of this report, the death of Nicola Bulley. The loss of Nicola has left her family and friends dealing with immeasurable grief. My thoughts continue to be with them. As they are approaching their first Christmas without Nicola, I know that we'll all agree we must consider their feelings as we talk about this report. I would also like to pay tribute to Nicola's family's strength and patience. Now we've completed this review, I hope they're given the space to grieve in peace. The College is responsible for setting standards for the police in England and Wales. We used evidence-based knowledge in everything we develop, and we've reviewed this case against those robust standards. The College was commissioned by Lancashire's Police and Crime Commissioner, Andrew Snowden, in February of this year to undertake a fully independent review of the operational response to the reported missing person, Nicola Bulley. The review was tasked with providing insight into the effectiveness of the Constabulary's response over the course of the period that Nicola was missing. We've now formally presented this report to the Police and Crime Commissioner. The purpose of the College of Policing review was not to attribute blame or rerun the investigation into Nicola's disappearance and death, but rather to identify the learning for Lancashire Police and policing more broadly. We've not shied away from criticism, and I'll come to the areas for learning we've identified. But I want to start by saying we found the police investigation and search to have been well conducted by Lancashire Constabulary. We spoke to many officers and police staff and volunteers who worked on this investigation, and their dedication and commitment was clear to see. They demonstrated the very best of policing. Their professionalism and operational activity was exemplary, and while there's much to learn from this tragic incident, Lancashire Constabulary should be recognised for that. I also want to put on record my sincere thanks to everyone who supported this review, answered our questions and provided us with any information we requested. We found a genuine willingness to learn. I don't propose to go through each recommendation made in the report in detail, but rather speak to the overall issues that we found. Looking at all of the evidence available to us, we believe the decision not to declare a critical incident set the tone within the constabulary and led to several challenges. The College of Policing defines a critical incident as any incident where the effectiveness of the police response is likely to have a significant impact on the confidence of the victim, their family and or the community. This investigation clearly met that definition. So whilst we found the constabulary deployed considerable resources and identified Nicola's disappearance as high risk, the failure to declare a critical incident is significant and impacts on the decision-making process throughout the investigation. As you'll know, Nicola's disappearance received unprecedented levels of interest from both mainstream media and social media. Lancashire Constabulary's press office logged more than 500 media calls and 75,000 inbound social media comments over a period of about a month. At the peak of media attention, the investigation generated 6,500 news articles globally in a single day. On social media, the BBC estimated that TikTok alone featured 270 million videos with the hashtag of Nicola Bulley's name. There is no doubt how hard the communications team worked during this investigation. Many worked long hours, provided sound advice and tried their absolute best. But we found the constabulary did not recognise the extent of the media interest in this case, or the impact that it was having on public confidence. The coverage of Nicola's disappearance was on a par with many national media stories in recent times, and was one of, if not the most high-profile media incident that Lancashire Constabulary has ever experienced. One of the decisions which has arguably the most significant impact on public confidence was the release of personal information about Nicola's health. We found that due process was followed in this decision and that it was lawful, but we are in no doubt that releasing this information in the manner the constabulary did was both avoidable and unnecessary. Whilst there is substantial learning for the constabulary, there are also findings and recommendations for policing nationally. The review found the wider relationship between the police and the media to be fractured, and identified that action needs to be taken on all sides to help build trust. The impact of social media on policing was illustrated starkly, and the significance for investigations and public confidence must also be acknowledged. The activity to address both of these areas of learning must now be considered closely at a national level, including by the College of Policing. Finally, I want to put firmly on record that the constabulary welcomed the review team with transparency and candour. It's of significant credit to Lancashire Constabulary that their officers and staff have displayed and continue to display a real willingness to learn. We stand ready to support them, the Police and Crime Commissioner and wider policing as we look to implement the important learning from this review. As this report concludes, we continue to have Nicola, her family and friends in our thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there's already been a briefing given. We'll take one question per news outlet, and myself and Andy will answer them based on whether they sit as part of national learning and the competence of the review, the contents of the review, or whether it's around local policing here in Lancashire. So.
Hi, good morning, Martin Blunt from Sky News. Can I ask Andy, there's a lot that Lancashire got wrong according to this report. Your biggest criticism appears to be over the release of personal information around Nicola. You described it as avoidable and unnecessary. That sounds like a slap on the wrist. How bad really was it?
We felt that we should be very clear in our findings, and as I said in my opening comments, that we didn't shy away from making criticism where criticism was due. We also complemented the exemplary search and investigation. It's a serious criticism. It's linked to the failure to declare it a critical incident, and had it been declared a critical incident earlier, a command structure with a gold, silver, bronze decision-making process would have given greater scrutiny to the relationship with the media, the deployment of family liaison officers, and the press releases which were made.
The report says the police investigation was highly professional, in contrast to the management of communications. I think every journalist that had to deal with the press office struggled to get answers. We now know that in some cases only 2 press officers on a day. There was issues where the press office didn't accept help from an outside force. The main criticism seemed to come from this press office. Why is it that Elizabeth Riding has not tendered her resignation? And would you like her to? And Andrew, when this was happening, we came to your office to try to ask you what sort of scrutiny you were going to give the police. You didn't do that. Instead, you waited until the end of the investigation because you didn't want to get involved with it. But we've seen in this review that had there been steps during it, then some of those issues could have been raised. Why were you so unwilling to pass criticism and hold the police to account at the time when there was clear failures?
First, with regard to the issues within the media and communications team, so as the report has rightly highlighted, they were under immense pressure through an unprecedented amount of contact that was into the media and engagement team. The review has rightly identified ways in which that could have been better managed in the future. As I said at the start in my opening statement, there have been no grounds for which anyone has conducted anything that could be considered misconduct. This is learning for the organisation about how it can better handle media relations in the future during these unprecedented cases. And the team has been incredibly transparent and has conducted their interactions with this review with candour, and we are really comfortable that those learnings have already been taken on. In regards to my own role, my role is to hold the police to account for providing an efficient and effective policing service to the residents of Lancashire. My role does not legally include the ability to interfere in police operations on a day-to-day basis. I was very clear throughout the review that I would give the Chief Constable and the team the backing that they needed to be able to find Nicola, which is what this was crucially about, and that investigation was conducted in an exemplary manner, as has been highlighted by the review. And the most important thing for me at that moment in time, and everybody else in the constabulary, was about finding Nicola. In terms of how that could have been better presented to the outside world, how that could have been better engaged with the media and with social media, then there is clear learning from that, which the constabulary will most definitely be picking up going forward, and I will be holding them to account through the process that I usually hold them to account, Accountability Board, where I'll be asking the Chief Constable to come back with a report about how all these recommendations are going to be implemented. Any further questions?
I'm Savage from BBC. The report talks about that there should have been a higher profile figurehead from the constabulary being visible at news conferences and public facing. It alludes to the fact that perhaps people were reluctant to have difficult conversations within the constabulary to perhaps challenge the senior officers and the chief. Will you now be challenging the chief as to why they didn't front up during that investigation to make themselves more visible?
Absolutely. As I said, as part of that accountability process going forward about how I will take this report and learn from the recommendations, the Chief Constable and the team will be coming back to me with a report on how they are going to implement those findings. They will be discussed at length in Accountability Board. There are clear recommendations within the report around visibility from senior leadership within the organisation, and that will form part of the discussions.
Were you disappointed in their performance during the inquiry?
No, I have full confidence in the Chief Constable and his team. I think it is really, really important to know that throughout all of this, the whole constabulary, the whole effort was around finding Nicola. That area of work has been described as exemplary by the report. Everything that we are talking about here is around the packaging around that core investigation, and therefore the Chief has my full support, because primarily he has been so open and transparent in how he has engaged with this review process and has shown a keenness for the organisation and for the Chief Officer team to learn from the recommendations and to take them forward. Thank you.
In terms of the failure to declare if this is a critical incident, what would that have meant in practical terms? So, for example, with the area around the bench, would that have been declared a crime scene? Would that have an effect on people arriving at the scene? Just explain what you mean by this whole idea of the failure to declare.
Thank you. So our policy, training and doctrine is rich in information on the use of critical incidents. They can be declared by any person, and they're easier to de-escalate, indeed, than sometimes to escalate after the event. Had there been a critical incident declared, the clarity of leadership at bronze, silver, gold would have been much better. It would have led to decision-making that was connected to the gold commander. Usually in an incident like this, a chief officer whose responsibility is to oversee all aspects of an investigation or critical incident, to oversee the resourcing, oversee the well-being, and that would have had an impact on release of information, release of media statements, decision-making about who was the talking head, the face of the force. Generally advised not to be the senior investigating officer on a major incident because they have got their hands full dealing with pressing matters other than talking to the media. So that is a well-understood doctrine within policing, and it makes sure there is no misunderstandings, that a strategy is followed. Our review talks about the formulation of a strategy and the development of that strategy throughout this investigation. So we believe that the failure to call it a critical incident until the 16th of February did lead to several challenges in the resourcing and management of this incident, notably the media management.
Any questions?
Paul O'Gorman, BBC Radio Lancashire. How convinced are you that the manner in which the media, mainstream media, is dealt with by the constabulary? How convinced are you that this report alone will make a significant change in that? I'm just wondering, in terms of the timescale for the information that's been provided to the college, do the parameters of this investigation tell the whole story? As a journalist working in Lancashire for many years, I would say that there's been a shift in attitude to questions from the media, even going to other major stories like, for example, fracking, that it was, during fracking, was extremely difficult to get any comment whatsoever about the policing of that, which was a major incident. And the expectations of newsrooms of a response from the police have changed significantly over maybe the last decade or so. How confident are you that this report and the actions that will come from it will make a significant enough shift for the same situation to be avoided in the future?
Thank you very much for the question. Given this is particularly about Lancashire, I'll take this question. I think it's really clear from the review when you read it that the vacuum of information is what in part led to the constabulary completely losing control of the narrative around this story, both regionally, nationally and internationally. And I think one of the key findings on the communication and engagement side is, one, yes, around the relationship between the police and the press, around the fact that maybe, I think it's fair to say and fair to deduce from this report that post-Leveson, though the pendulum has swung too far the other way around the formality and structure of relations, it is not a bad thing for the police to be able to do things such as non-reportable briefings and provide that additional context and information where there is a clear policing purpose. And the other side of it is if there is a vacuum of information, one of the areas that we wanted to look at in this review has been very much around the role of social media. And I think what has been seen from the analysis that has been done of the timeline between the amount of views and interaction on social media versus mainstream media is when the police lose control of the narrative with the mainstream media, that fuels social media speculation. And some of the social media speculation was abhorrent that went on and was incredibly damaging and hurtful to many, many people. And therefore, for me, there is a key learning here, which is around the police cannot lose control of narratives in major investigations by allowing other people to fill the information vacuum. And that is something that we will be picking up locally in Lancashire. It is something that I will be holding the force to account for, to ensure that in future major incidents, critical incidents declared, that making sure that the police stay in control of the narrative by being the go-to people for the reliable and fact-checked information. The police should be the figures of authority in these situations and that are available to do so. And that is something that I will be holding the Chief Constable to account for.
If I can add as well, Andrew, we're grateful for the support of various media and representative bodies in giving us feedback to come to the views and conclusions that we did in this lessons learned report. Whilst there may well be issues for Lancashire specifically to address around their media management and the way in which they interact with the Chief Officer leadership team, there certainly are national issues, which is why we've made recommendations for a wider consideration of the impact on social media, on investigations and critical incidents, but also we've called for the National Police Chiefs Council lead, and the lead on this is Pippa Mills, who works within the Metropolitan Police, who the college will be working very closely with to actually understand how we can reset this relationship so that police forces are able to be more open, more transparent, make appeals for assistance, sometimes give confidential briefings about material which wouldn't be appropriate to put into the public domain. So this aspect of the report is not all about Lancashire.
Thank you very much. Any more questions?
Hi, I'm from the Daily Mirror. Part of the report talks about the weekend of the 18th and the 19th of February, when a number of experts who've been brought in described that that would be an interesting weekend in terms of the flotation and the tidal kind of patterns. And as a result of that, plans for the search were stepped up for that weekend. But the report doesn't seem to touch on the fact that it was actually a member of the public who actually found Nicola, namely somebody who claimed to be a medium, who actually went on to post about the fact that they'd found this on their own social media. So I just wonder, given the observations that the report has made about the issues with social media, what the College of Policing thought about that, because obviously that is quite significant and doesn't seem to be really covered in the report as far as I can see.
Lancashire Constabulary used a number of expert consultants to advise them on the parameters of the search, and we commend that. That's good practice which other police forces should consider under similar circumstances. And I know from my own experience that searching for people who are lost in watercourseways, both the sea, coastal or tidal, or indeed land-based rivers, is very complex. It's complicated, and I think the report does do justice to why this was a difficult search and why it took so long for Nicola's body to be found. And we did find, and I think this is very important, as the Commissioner said in his opening comments, that nothing could have been done that we saw that would have led to Nicola's body being found sooner. We made one observation about the recovery. It was predicted that Nicola's body would be found during those 2 days. I think the 20th was a day that it was predicted. The constabulary should have made better preparations for preservation of the scene to prevent intrusion at the scene of that recovery.
Yeah, you've talked a lot about the learning, but how confident are you that if a similar high-profile incident were to happen tomorrow, for example, that Lancashire Constabulary or other police forces would be ready and able to deal with it?
I think the learning, particularly around the loss of the media narrative in particular, which actually is linked then through to the disclosure of personal information. The recommendations, which I thank the college for, are actually really, really clear, well written, and give actual actions that can be taken forward by the constabulary. My conversations with the Chief Constable and senior officers at the constabulary that this review is already in part being implemented. There are many things that the constabulary have reflected on themselves ahead of the review formally being released, with actions undertaken. And I think for me, the real clear things that Chief Constable Marsh has just highlighted are very, very practical things that can be implemented. Making sure you understand the appropriate point to declare a critical incident when it is the media and public interest in a case that is driving the need for it to be a critical incident rather than the nature of the case itself. And I think this is a lesson that Lancashire Constabulary has learnt incredibly well from, given the experience that they went through. We've obviously got lots more work to do in my role of holding the constabulary to account now for how they implement the broader recommendations. But I would suggest the key finding and the key learning now is actually making sure that beyond Lancashire that other police forces learn from the unprecedented nature of the case that Lancashire has been through.
So I would like to offer some reassurance about how seriously the findings will be taken. So we know that the circumstances that led to Nicola being missing, a high-risk missing person, happen every single day, every single hour of every day across every police force in England and Wales. So we need to be ready to deal with this. Now, I would say that there are three ways in which we can give some assurance that policing more broadly, never mind Lancashire, will take this seriously. First of all, we've committed in the report to review and refresh our guidance, also known as authorised professional practice. That will make a significant change. We will also implement changes to training for a number of different roles and responsibilities. Family liaison officers, senior investigating officers, particularly about the way in which they go about engaging with the media. And certainly our leadership training at every level, and I'm responsible for the police leadership training across England and Wales, will incorporate the management of critical incidents and how to respond to these. What Lancashire found, which is regrettable, is that they did not have sufficient experts available who could talk openly about what the police were doing. And openness and transparency is the antidote to mistrust when there's huge public interest. And we need to make sure that we've got officers and staff who can speak very openly about the police tactics and the rationale for those tactics to reassure the public and, indeed, as Andrew's already mentioned, to prevent inaccurate rumours, inaccurate and hurtful and damaging rumours gaining traction on social media.
There's a lot of criticism of senior leadership and a lot of praise of these lower ranks. It's true that no one's faced any consequences in the senior leadership. Has anyone been spoken to or given a written warning? The ombudsman is supposed to hold them accountable.
As we said at the start in the opening statement, I asked the College of Policing to make sure that if anything warranted misconduct, which would be the things that you've just requested to, formal letters being written around conduct, that if anything that the college found as part of their review showed misconduct by any individual within the constabulary, that I be notified not at the end of the report but during the report process, as that would need to be dealt with in that course. The Independent Office for Police Conduct and the college have not found anything that warrants misconduct levels within this review. However, there are significant areas of learning as part of the review that I will be holding the Chief Constable to account for implementing across the force, including those reflections around visibility and the leadership within the investigation around declaring a critical incident.
It might not reach the level of misconduct, but it's talking about poor leadership, isn't it, and bad culture, and senior officers not listening to lower ranks, and staff not feeling supported. Doesn't that merit some sort of consequence?
As we said, the report highlights a range of areas in which the constabulary can learn from this, including around the leadership of the organisation. I think in order for the organisation to be able to complete the search in a way that can be described as exemplary shows that the leadership of the organisation are doing something right in terms of having the right resources in the right place to do a good job. There are areas for reflection. That is absolutely accepted, and I will hold the Chief Constable to account as part of the accountability process following this report.
In a previous answer there, you kind of hit the nail on the head that as members of the media, we receive press releases literally every day, multiple times a day, with missing people, and a lot of those missing people never get publicised, unfortunately, because there are so many. A lot of those missing people, as you said, are also high risk, and that gives us sort of a context around that missing person. I think it's arguable to say that none of us would be here today had that first press release said she was high risk missing, because it would have totally changed the way that we approach the reporting of that, regardless of what went on to happen and subsequent search and all that. Would you agree that the ball was actually dropped on day one of this? It was literally that first mistake that has led to all of this.
So the release of Nicola's personal information was unnecessary and unavoidable, and actually there were opportunities to stop that happening throughout the investigation. It would have been much better had Nicola been declared as a high-risk missing person from the outset, and indeed there was an early press conference where some misleading information was given that said there were no issues of vulnerability around Nicola, which actually probably contributed to a number of the conspiracy theories about, well, something awful must have happened then if there were no vulnerabilities that led to her being high risk. So I wouldn't say day one. Some of the best practice we found was on day one. So within 27 minutes of the call first being received about Nicola being missing, an inspector had reviewed it and given it high priority, and there was excellent attendance in the first 24 hours. Senior investigating officer visiting the scene, reviews, significant searches. I would say that was where some of the best practice occurred, but the problem started, I would say, particularly around that first press conference and the failure to manage the information being released to the media and the opportunities that would have prevented that very personal, very damaging, and for the public, very concerning information being released about Nicola.
So maybe not day one of the police investigation as a whole, but day one of that very first contact that the press team had with the media?
Yes.
Yeah, I think something that I take as Commissioner from the review is that from very early on there was a lack of clarity around why Nicola was a high-risk missing person, and around how that was managed with the media that contributed to that fractured relationship between the media and the police on this case, and the loss of narrative. And in terms of the question that was asked around learning for the future and making sure that we don't happen again, that's some of the key recommendations that are in the review are around that real clarity and transparency of why someone is high risk, missing persons, and the use of non-reportable briefings where there's a clear policing purpose.
Do you think then that later disclosure about the personal details was just an overcorrection, a realisation of, oh, we probably should have gone down this road earlier, they did it too late, they did it in a clumsy way, there was too much information? What do you think they were trying to achieve at that point in the investigation by divulging what they did?
So the review articulates that the decision was clearly rationalised and had a clear policing purpose. So the release of the information, hence being shown as a lawful decision, was well rationalised with the right intent and with a clear policing purpose. However, arriving at that point, and that's the key learning from this report, arriving at that point where that rationalisation became apparent and where that clear policing purpose became needed, partly to safeguard the family and partly to regain control around what the vulnerabilities around Nicola were that led to her being high risk, was avoidable. And I think that's the key point that the review highlights, is that arriving at that position where it was a policing purpose, rationalised decision, was entirely avoidable for the reasons that we've just articulated during the build-up in the investigation.
Hi, Adam from National World Post about Public. The report is highly critical of independent dive expert Peter Folden, who appeared to force his way into the centre of the investigation and cause, ultimately, irreparable distress to the family. How on earth was that allowed to happen, and what would be done in future to prevent this kind of individual from disrupting investigation in this way?
So I'd make a mild correction, if I might, to your opening statement. So we're not highly critical. We factually lay out the impact of that independent dive expert in the search. And his interactions with the media weren't coordinated with constabulary media releases, and it certainly led to complications and challenges for the force. We, at the earliest stage of recognising there were issues around the drawdown of expert advisors on a list held by the National Crime Agency, we escalated that concern to the head of the National Crime Agency, who's undertaking a review. I understand that that dive expert is no longer on the NCA list of expert advisors, and I expect, as you'll see from the recommendations, other changes to take place to ensure that those incredibly useful, on many occasions, experts for investigations are available for policing, but available under the right circumstances. Now, clearly, where independent advisors are used, we're of a view that they should sign a non-disclosure agreement, which is legally binding, and the way in which they're able or not to interact with the media in the best interest of everyone, but particularly victims and family members and friends, needs to be coordinated by police forces commissioning such services.
Will there be any fallout against Peter Folden for breaching the NDA?
That's not a matter for my independent review. We've made an observation about the facts and the audit trail of what happened. He is no longer on the list of the National Crime Agency's independent advisors.
Any other questions?
If I can ask you both a different question, if that's okay. Commissioner, have you spoken to the Chief Constable about the approach the force is taking to communicating with the media today? You've said that he's been very open and transparent, but you're both here answering our questions. He is not, and they're doing a pooled interview to address what you've said in the report. Are you satisfied with that approach?
I think for myself, as long as the constabulary are open and engaging with the review process, that is the important thing. This is a review that I have commissioned into the force, and therefore it is for myself and Andy to be here to take questions around the review, the process, its content, and then how I am going to hold the force to account. How the constabulary choose to use their own engagement with the media around the findings is a decision for themselves, and I am sure that they will provide open and transparent answers later this morning to questions that are asked of them in those pool interviews and further questions that come in throughout the day.
If I can ask you, in the report you say that there was criticism of the disclosure of information from some who said that it was sexist and misogynist, on the basis that that information, it seems inconceivable it would have been put out there, comparable information, if we were talking about a missing man. You've laid out the chain of events so we can now see how it got to that point. But that doesn't stop it being sexist or misogynist. So do you now think that if this were a missing man, the police would have been saying publicly, to use Dame Robert's example, that he had erectile dysfunction and was an alcoholic?
Well, I am of a view that the release of that sort of information, and it's without imagining all of the circumstances, would also be avoidable and unnecessary. So we did consider the question of sexism and misogyny, and whilst we found the release of that information to be avoidable and unnecessary, we didn't find evidence of sexism and misogyny in the rationale behind it. But let me be clear, it's unnecessary and unavoidable in the same way it would be about very personal information of a similar nature about a man.
Do you believe they would have put the information out there if it were a man?
I don't want to get drawn into that sort of speculation because we know about this scenario. I'm not knowing about an equivalent scenario that we're imagining. It would be avoidable and unnecessary, whoever the person. It's private medical information. It's very personal, whether it's a man or a woman.
The report talked about a sort of complete breakdown in public confidence around the police investigation. Are you worried that this investigation has done reputational damage to Lancashire police, to the people who live here, and how do you get that confidence back?
Quite an interesting question. I don't think it resulted in a complete breakdown in public confidence. Actually, if you go back through the social media and media narrative, it was very much mixed. And the sentiment, as I do public meetings across the county, actually locally is stronger and more supportive than it is nationally. Because actually here on the ground locally, the people saw the actual police investigation and search operation underway, and they can actually see it with their own eyes rather than what they necessarily read. And therefore, I don't think it was a complete collapse of public confidence. I think that would be taking it too far, but it obviously did do significant damage to the reputation of the constabulary at the time. There's been a lot of work done to rebuild that since, and for myself around making sure that there is complete transparency and openness in accepting the findings of the review and the engagement with the review up until this point, being really clear that they're learning from the review and moving onwards is a critical part of rebuilding that confidence.
Can I go back to Peter Fording? He says now that within 6 minutes of his first search around the bench area, that he found Nicola's body, and he showed you his sonar images. What's your response to that?
So the area around the bench was searched 3 times, and the 3rd time was in response, direct response to the report of his suspicions. We have shown as part of the review the images of Peter Fording's images from that area at that time, and 2 independent experts have said that it's unlikely that that was a body. So I don't think there's credibility to that claim.
Unlikely, but you can't...
Well, highly unlikely. It's in the report.
Are there any other questions?
I mean, I do think it's important to clarify this. The area was searched immediately after that report, and there was nothing there. I think that's really important. We have to deal with the facts here.
We've got one online.
One online.
Rebecca, if you hear me, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks for that. Rebecca Canberra from the Daily Mail. Reading this report, it seems to me, or the media findings, is a failure to be open and to be honest at times in that first press conference. Andy Marsh, do you have a message that you want to send out to all forces about being more open and honest with the media?
Thank you for that, Rebecca. We've more work to do, and I sincerely hope that I'll be able to work with you and other professionals in this room to reach a better working relationship for the good of the public. That's what we need at heart. And good investigative journalism and good reporting of facts, as I've said, has helped in murder investigations I've been part of to solve those murders and to retain and build trust through openness and transparency, even when things have gone wrong. Now, some of you will recall the comments I made in the official police response to the Hillsborough tragedy, where I apologised along with Martin Hewitt for what happened in the years that followed that awful incident. I do believe that the police should have openness, candour, honesty as a basis for their accountability and professionalism. And I hope in the near future, through the refresh of the Code of Ethics, which the college will be leading, and I hope that many of you will report on that, that we will bring an even sharper spotlight on the need for candour and openness.
Thank you very much for your attendance at this press conference, and we shall call it a close at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.